Let's get into the top story this week. As we prepare to turn the page on the wildest year in wrestling in decades. A year that saw what I am sure a lot of you listening to this thought we would never see. Which is Vince McMahon stepping down as the head of creative in WWE. Resigning from the company. Forced into a retirement that he never wanted. Just when we thought we finally had rid ourselves of the Vince McMahon era, the Wall Street Journal dropped another story on Tuesday that served as a wake-up call that if 2022 was the fall of Vince McMahon, then 2023 may end up being the resurrection of Vince McMahon. I sound like I'm talking about a fucking Michael Myers movie. This is a real-life horror film. The Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday that Vince McMahon, the majority owner and former CEO of WWE, is facing legal demands from two women who allege that he sexually assaulted them, according to internal documents and people familiar with the legal negotiations. In a November 3rd demand letter to McMahon's representative, a lawyer for former wrestling referee Rita Chatterton asked for $11.75 million in damages after she publicly accused McMahon 3 decades ago of assaulting her in a limousine, which McMahon has always denied. He's always denied that story. The Chatterton story, by the way, and the allegation that she made against McMahon is not new. I've talked about it many times on the podcast before. New York and California are 2 states that have a new law that allows alleged victims of sex abuse to file lawsuits that typically would be barred by the statute of limitations. The article says starting next month, victims will have a 1-year window to file such claims. But the article goes on here. In a separate November email to McMahon's attorney, a lawyer for a former spa manager said that McMahon assaulted his client in 2011 at a California resort, an incident previously unreported in the media. So this is a new allegation. This is not to be confused with the alleged tanning salon incident from 2006 in Florida. I know it's hard to keep track of all this stuff, but these are 2 separate things. It says McMahon has told people that he refuses to pay settlements to Chatterton and the former spa manager. Chatterton's current lawyer said in the demand letter that he, or she rather, had passed a polygraph and that multiple sources corroborated her account, 2 of whom confirmed that Chatterton contemporaneously told them about the incident. Jon Wisniewski, who wrestled as Greg Valentine, told the Journal that Chatterton disclosed the allegations while the 2 were sharing a marijuana cigarette in a Marriott hotel parking lot in Albany, New York in the 1980s. Wisniewski said he did not believe Ms. Chatterton then or now because he didn't think that she was attractive enough for Mr. McMahon. Which is quite a thing to say. And to be fair, Bret Hart said the same thing once in a shoot interview with Sean Oliver. But it is not surprising to hear Greg Valentine say it, coming from a guy who a few years ago said that he would fire every girl wrestler because they take jobs away from men. But Rita Chatterton was too ugly for this to be true, he says, coming from somebody who looks like Mama Fratelli from the Goonies. The former spa manager alleges that she was assaulted by McMahon in 2011 at a 5-star resort in Southern California while he was in town for a WWE event. The spa manager reported the alleged assault at the time to the resort, according to people familiar with the matter, and also told her husband about the incident. He drove to the WWE event with a baseball bat and tried to confront McMahon, but was turned away. The woman's lawyer has been in touch with McMahon's attorney since at least July. So another day and another allegation against Vince McMahon. And those who defend him will tell you that they're all lying. It's all lies. Damn lies. You know, a normal person, though, would look at this and say, something is seriously wrong with this man, that he has multiple women in different states who have no obvious connection to one another, accusing him of assault over a period of years. There's a pattern here. You've heard the expression, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a pattern here. And it doesn't paint a very pretty picture. But it is hardly surprising when here's a guy who's already paid out something like $20 million in hush money that we know of. But as a viewer of the WWE product, it's the next part of this article that caught my attention. And WWE sources have since confirmed the same to Dave Meltzer, which is that McMahon also has told people that he intends to make a comeback at WWE. According to the people familiar with his comments, he has said that he received bad advice from people close to him to step down, and that he now believes the allegations and investigations would have blown over had he stayed. Of course he does. Of course he feels that way. In his mind, he did nothing wrong. It's someone else's fault. It's always someone else's fault. There's always a scapegoat in these situations. I'm sure another allegation going public is exactly what WWE's board of directors and their shareholders and their partners love to hear as he plots his comeback. They fired Mandy Rose this week for posting the content that she did, yet Vince McMahon, the sex pest, he's going to be the comeback kid. What a great story. Hey, look, he still owns it. He can try if he wants to. But I would think that there would be some important people who don't look very kindly upon that. Now, per the Observer, the general feeling within the company is that things are so much better without McMahon there. The talent is happier, right? The water is crisper. The air smells a little bit fresher. The sky's a little more blue when you look up in the air. And even those who have been McMahon allies are negative about the prospects of him coming back. Dave Scherer of PW Insider spoke to at least a dozen people who work for WWE, and not a single one of them want to see Vince McMahon come back. In fact, every one of them feels just the opposite. Under the current regime, and look, whatever you think of the television product that Triple H is putting out, under the current regime, people are happier and they are enjoying going to work in ways that they did not before. Before, they just sort of accepted, okay, this is the way it is. This is Vince McMahon's WWE. You know, it's still WWE, right? It's the biggest wrestling company in the world, and it was run the way that it was, and you just sort of accepted it, or you didn't, and you left and you went to go work somewhere else. But now it's like, holy shit, this is what it feels like to not come to work every day walking on eggshells. They have no desire to go back to the way things were. Can you imagine if this guy swaggers back into Titan Tower? Just the visual of him swaggering back into the building, his arms flailing around. How long before he brings Johnny Ace back? Why not get the whole band back together? Johnny Ace was apparently the idiot, by the way, William Regal was referring to in the stage show that he did in October with Inside the Ropes. Vince McMahon coming back to WWE would be a fucking nightmare. You hear that and it sounds unlikely, right? Oh, this is all, just pie in the sky, what if type stuff. Especially, you got more of these allegations that are still surfacing that we didn't even know about. Who knows when the next shoe might drop? We're going to get one of these every 3 months, possibly. You think the company wants to live with that over its head for the next 5 years? The stock is doing better than it was before he left. It certainly didn't plummet the way that some people feared it might when the day finally came that he either died or retired. I can't imagine anybody in that company not named Bruce or Kevin wanting this man back. But he still has majority voting control because of the preferred stock that he still owns. So if he wanted to, he could make life difficult for Stephanie and Nick Khan and Triple H. And Meltzer brought up a good point in The Observer, which is that so long as Vince McMahon is looking at returning or contemplating the possibility of coming back, it makes it very difficult for the company to be sold. Because any sale would have to be approved by Vince McMahon. If the company is sold, there goes all of his power. There goes all of his leverage. As it stands now, he can't be voted out. It's just how things are structured with the shares that he still owns. He owns less than 40% of WWE, but his shares give him 80% of the voting power. He knew what he was doing, the way this was structured. If he wanted back in, the board of directors would have to approve such a move, and the board is made up of people that he handpicked himself. But you hear the term fiduciary responsibility thrown around sometimes. The board has a responsibility to make moves that are going to help the company make money and not lose money. Vince McMahon coming back could cause the company to lose money. It could cause the stock price to fall. It could cause partners and sponsors to pull out. That would harm the stock price. If that happens, the other shareholders could sue. So we are a long way yet from Vince McMahon putting the headset back on and reinstating the 24/7 title. But just the mere fact that we are even talking about this is very scary. What must Triple H be thinking when he hears about this? He read the article. For all we know, he may hear it at the dinner table when they get together for the holidays. I wonder what Thanksgiving looks like. I wonder what Christmas. That might be a very awkward Christmas dinner this year. But you know that he's seeing this. He's reading these articles. He's seeing all the messages on social media. He's less than 6 months into his new job, and you know now in the back of his mind he's thinking, you got to be shitting me with this. I beat a heart attack and heart failure to come back for this? How do you think all those people that got fired, that he brought back, must be feeling hearing this? They've got a queasy feeling in the pit of their stomach right now. William Regal is coming back as a vice president, we found out this week, as of the first of the year, which is tremendous, after being fired to come back in a VP role, which sounds like a lot more than just the coaching role that Tony Khan said it would be. Regal had nothing but good things to say about Vince McMahon and how he was treated. Vince even let him start with AEW while he was still being paid on his WWE deal. The only man in history to ever draw a paycheck from WWE and AEW at the same time. But as nice as Vince may have been to him, he still got fired for no good reason under Vince McMahon's watch. Who's to say it doesn't happen again? And what's he going to do then? He's going to call Tony back and say, oh, just kidding. WWE has become the place to be for a lot of people who may not have wanted to go there or to go back because of how they perceive they might be booked by a Vince McMahon regime. This would be one way to wash away all of that goodwill that Triple H has built up. You already have people who don't think Vince McMahon ever really left. Monday Night Raw has been back in the shitter now for weeks. Some people joke, oh, he's already back. He's booking the show on Mondays. Maybe some of those people are serious. Something like this is not going to do anything to dispel those rumors and the conspiracy theories. They have television rights negotiations coming up next year. They're going to probably double or triple what they're making now. But this is not going to help. If they're shopping their shows around to other potential partners with the looming specter of a Vince McMahon return hanging over things, maybe one of those networks or one of those streaming partners that they're talking to says, we're interested, but only if we're given assurances that Vince McMahon won't come back to power. They can't guarantee that. So long as he has that power, they can't guarantee that. So maybe some people who would otherwise be interested suddenly lose interest because they don't want to deal with any kind of public relations nightmare. And then there's also the possibility that maybe absolutely none of that happens. Maybe the allegations don't matter to them and they just see Vince's track record and they would be very happy to do business with him. We just don't know. But just the mere possibility of that could be damaging to the company. The big question is, who leaked this information to the Wall Street Journal? Same as the emails earlier this year that launched the whole board of directors investigation in the first place. We never did find out, and probably never will, who leaked that information. It could be the same people leaking stuff now about Vince wanting to make a comeback. Try to pour cold water on the fire before it turns into a raging inferno. One thing that we have learned since the summer is that WWE does not need Vince McMahon. What he created and what he built can be managed by his family and by other people, and it won't just fall apart. Their stock is up about 15% since Vince resigned, and it actually dropped a little bit when this story came out. Television ratings have not suffered, even though Raw just tied its all-time record low audience on USA Network last Monday. 1.47 million viewers. And I know some people are going to point to that as an excuse of Triple H's failure. It's a reason to bring back the old man. I said it tied the all-time record low. Keyword there is tied. You know the last time the show did 1.47 million viewers? July 5th of last year. Do you know who was running things when they did that number? Vince McMahon. Raw numbers were up in the weeks after Triple H took the book, and now they've settled back to their record lows. But Vince McMahon's television is what helped get them there in the first place. Raw has been losing viewers year after year since the move to 3 hours in 2012. SmackDown is proof that if you give people a good show with stories they want to see, you will be rewarded for it. SmackDown most weeks is well over 2 million viewers on Fox. SmackDown has been kicking ass most weeks. Vince McMahon already tore down what Triple H built once before, and the team he put together in NXT. We don't need him to come back and do the same thing on the main roster. Triple H needs time to sink or swim on his own. So far, he hasn't done any worse than Vince McMahon was doing, and in a lot of areas, he's done much better. It sounds from everything I've been reading like it's a more relaxed atmosphere backstage. We don't get stories of scripts being torn up and shows being rewritten hours before they go on the air. The announcing, at least on SmackDown, has been a breath of fresh air. Michael Cole feels renewed. Triple H got it wrong by replacing Jimmy Smith with Kevin Patrick. That was a mistake. But again, at least on Friday nights, the commentary has actually improved. There's been more of an emphasis on the mid-card titles, the 24/7 title being retired, and the end of those lazy segments is one of the best things Triple H has done so far. We've seen them try new concepts on the main roster from NXT, like War Games, which they should have done years ago, the Fight Pit. The Bloodline story with Sami Zayn, which had already started under Vince McMahon, has been the best thing on television for months. If Vince was still around, it probably would have been over 3 months ago. Look at the Judgment Day. It was basically on death's door. And it has become one of my favorite things on Monday Night Raw, especially the whole dynamic with Rhea Ripley and Dominic. You know, Triple H replacing his father-in-law basically saved Finn Balor's career. Look at LA Knight. Just the fact that they dumped the stupid Max Dupree stuff and they're letting him be who he is on TV is all the proof you need of real change. Triple H thought Becky Lynch was swimming upstream as a heel, so one of the first things he did was turn her back babyface, which was the correct move. Damage control has not been great. I can understand wanting to put Io Sky in a group with other people because her promo skills are not great. Her English is not great. But this group just is not working. And I think Io would be better off as a babyface. But for every damage control, there is Imperium, which was reunited with all 3 members under Triple H. I would like to see Kaiser and Vinci develop a little bit more, not just be, Walter's sidekicks. Under Vince McMahon, they were sort of doing that with Kaiser when Walter would berate him and abuse him every week. I don't know if that was the correct way to do it. But with Vinci and NXT, they were trying to have him show off more personality. I think there's room to do that on SmackDown too. We had the return of Bray Wyatt. I remember after he was released, the reports they leaked about him being difficult to work with and all of this stuff. That's what they do. To make themselves look better, they'll leak shit about people. Vince did the same thing with his own daughter. They buried Stephanie to Business Insider after she announced her leave of absence. You know that shit doesn't happen without Vince knowing about it or approving it. This is what they do. But the White Rabbit campaign, that was a huge success. Everybody went gaga for Bray's return. It's getting very repetitive now. A lot of these segments, I wish they would move things along a little bit faster, but he would not have gotten the second chance that he is getting now under Vince McMahon. We have seen a lot of people brought back by Triple H and given a second chance. Anderson and Gallows, Karrion Kross and Scarlett, Johnny Gargano and Candice, right? Johnny made his choice to go back there. But they brought them back. Dexter Lumis, Hit Row, Dakota Kai, Mia Yim, Tegan Nox, Emma. The jury is still out on a lot of these returns. WrestleVotes tweeted on Thursday, I'm told a handful of talent brought back in the rehiring wave over the summer have underperformed and severely underwhelmed Triple H and others since returning to the company. Even if that's not true, I can believe that. Because I look at this and I see disappointment with some of these returns. And I'm underwhelmed by some of these returns. Hit Row has to be on that list. They have been a huge miss since they came back. And this was before Top Dollar took the big tumble that he took on SmackDown on Friday night. But without Swerve there to anchor the group, there's just nothing interesting about them. And I say that as someone who liked Hit Row and NXT. On the main roster, they were never given a chance. And I think the circumstances around their release, without getting into the details again, was extremely shitty. I was happy to see them get a second chance, but they were down a member, and it's been really noticeable. Johnny Gargano's been doing comedy segments. I think he'll get over just fine once they let him start telling stories in the ring instead of just working with The Miz. And I also wonder if Tommaso Ciampa's injury derailed any plans they may have had for Gargano. Because I think the best thing to do would have been to have Ciampa break away from The Miz and reunite DIY with Johnny Gargano. Let them get a tag team run on the main roster just like they had in NXT, get more established that way with the audience before breaking them out in singles runs. I wasn't asking for an Anderson and Gallows return. I wasn't asking for a Braun Strowman return. To be fair, though, Braun Strowman has been over with the live crowd, so it hasn't been a total waste. Karrion Kross is positioned as the number 3 heel on SmackDown right now behind Roman Reigns and Gunther. The reports, the reports may say that he's considered number 2, or he's listed internally number 2 on the pecking order as far as heels on SmackDown. You're not the fucking number 2 heel on SmackDown when you're barely on TV, and when you are, you're wrestling Madcap Moss. I'm sorry. He's number 3 at best. Now he's starting something with Rey Mysterio. I think working with Rey could be a great thing for him, but Kross's return so far has been underwhelming. Maybe it's the gimmick. The man can talk. He just hasn't had anything terribly interesting to say. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything is all roses and everything Triple H touches turns to gold. The jury is out on a lot of these returns. But I am excited to see what a Triple H booked Royal Rumble is going to look like. I am excited to see what a Triple H booked WrestleMania is going to look like. Even if you're not a fan of all the changes that he has made and the people that he has signed, WWE is still better off now than they were before under Vince McMahon. And I have hope that it can improve even more. Nothing was ever truly going to change until there was change at the top. I have been saying that for years. And to have people telling me, oh, we need Vince McMahon back, after all the shit that we have sat through for years, that going back to the way things were is the right move to make. Thank God you people aren't on the board of directors. Fightful spoke to one of the higher-ups in the company, who said that it would be a really selfish move for Vince McMahon to come back under any circumstances. But that selfish activities are what led to him leaving in the first place. If he truly cares for the company that he helped build, he will stay home and he will enjoy his retirement. Find a hobby. Go ice fishing. If he wants to keep working, he can start another bodybuilding federation. He can make the Liver King his star attraction. But if the past few months have proven anything, it is that this company can survive just fine without Vince McMahon. As I said the other day, the man is 77 years old. His time has come and gone. And for the sake of his company, there is only one thing that he needs to do, and it is the hardest thing for him to do. But it's the right thing for him to do. And that is stay the fuck away. Vice aired its 9 Lives of Vince McMahon documentary on Tuesday night. That was the same day that the Wall Street Journal story broke. And as you would expect, he was painted as the devil incarnate. I watched it, and I thought it was 2 hours of my life that I will never be able to get back. A very lazy effort. 90% of it was just recycled clips from old Dark Side of the Ring episodes. So if you never saw any of those episodes, or if you are not a wrestling fan and you did not know any of these stories coming in, maybe you liked it. Maybe you thought it was a fascinating look at a fascinating person. I didn't. It felt like a rush job trying to take advantage of their Dark Side audience after the Vince resignation news a few months ago. Without any involvement, by the way, from the Dark Side folks. I don't believe they had anything to do with this. This was all Vice. But it covered his upbringing and him taking over the company from his father, and David Schultz slapping John Stossel, Black Saturday on TBS, the first WrestleMania, the Rita Chatterton allegations, right? How timely. The death of Nancy Argentino and him walking into the police station with a briefcase before the cops decided against pressing charges against Jimmy Snuka and her death. I did an entire show on that case. The Dr. Zahorian stuff and the steroid trial, the Montreal Screwjob, the death of Owen Hart. They actually had the narrator claiming that Vince McMahon needed to find another big-name star to help carry the company when all of his gimmicky stars failed, and so he turned to Owen Hart. So imagine somebody who is not a wrestling fan, who does not know from anything here, hearing this. They're thinking that Owen Hart was called upon to be the savior of WWE. It is ridiculous. Vince McMahon never turned to Owen Hart to help save his company or to make him a top star. At a time when they had Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker and Kane and Stone Cold was on the rise. Owen came back a month after the screw job. He had one match on TV with Shawn Michaels, and then it was right back down the card he went. They never saw Owen as any kind of savior. And he wasn't, and I loved Owen, but he was not. The writing here was really bad. But that was their way of segueing into the story of Owen plummeting to his death. Then it was back to the plane ride from hell and Ric Flair's helicopter penis. Then they brought up Eddie Guerrero's death and having Randy Orton go on TV to tell Rey Mysterio that Eddie was in hell. But that was just their way of segueing into the Chris Benoit murder-suicide. Then they jumped back to the late 90s and the Attitude Era. This thing was all over the place. Then they finally ended with the Wall Street Journal story and the allegations that broke a few months ago. And maybe the biggest piece of news to come out of this came from, of all people, Vince Russo. So take this for what it's worth. Saying that he was told that Vince and Linda have been separated since 2012. Now, the fact that they would be separated is not a surprise at all. I'm sure they've been living separate lives for a while now. That seems pretty obvious. You know, Vince even slipped up on Pat McAfee's show before WrestleMania this year when he referred to Linda as my wife at the time. And then he corrected himself. But Russo is the first person I've heard put an actual date, an actual year to when they potentially split up. If you never saw any of the Dark Side of the Ring episodes, you can just watch this documentary and you can get the greatest hits. Because that's all this was. Otherwise, don't waste your time with this.